good idea to have roller coaster rate up and down.
If we were talking about $40,000 extra here, that's one thing. We're talking 1.5 times more than what you guys projected, or whatever, whoever made the proposal.
Right, so what you do is
It's the taxpayers' money. It's the people, the users' money. And for us to sit here and say, oh, we're gonna just take there and we'll hold on to it,
well, I think at
we
this
should
point,
seriously consider making a reduction. I don't know why we made it so, I mean, we went for all these years with no increase at all, which was wrong, and now we make this significant increase, and now we're not willing to make even a little bit adjustment to help these people out that could probably use a little bit of.
well, Mr. President, I think if it's, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think if that's the way the board wants to go, I would strongly suggest holding off until at least May, so at least you see where they're going. These are early numbers.
That's fair.
And to vote a reduction and then realize we didn't reach the $240,000 could be problematic.
Then why do we have to approve a rate tonight?
You know, I don't think you are.
It's in our
You're not approving it
policy.
tonight. It's coming up for the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
Tonight is just discussion.
Can we hold off till May?
Tonight is discussion. It's typically been done at this time of year because I believe it's in the board's policy.
I'd like to request the
I
board
think-
change in policy.
This is the way I look. First of all, it is a little premature. But I don't think it's a bad idea to build up in the water department, right, some retained earnings.
I don't disagree, Bob.
Because the retained earnings will allow to smooth out the ups and downs of water revenue, which we have experienced.
Mhm.
And at this point, I think, I feel very strongly that we should, we took the money out of the stabilization fund just like that in 1 year, right? And, if we have surplus money and we want to pay that back, I'd be in favor of paying that back if that's the issue, and keep the rates the way they are. And I do it for a couple of reasons. One is we have a water issue that we have to address.
We addressed it.
No, we have a water issue, which requires capital expenditure if we're going to get additional sources of water.
Yep.
Whether it be from any of the surrounding communities, right?
Yep.
We're going to pay fees for that.
Yep.
I think it's good to have that capital money restored as soon as possible.
But that wasn't the reason why we increased this, right?
Oh, we increased it for 2 reasons. One,
Well,
to
it
cover,
wasn't the sole reason, I should
to
say.
cover a deficit,
Yeah?
right? And to pay back what we took out.
And this
Now-
board agreed
No, but if you
$100,000 was
look
that
at,
number.
but if you look at historically on our enterprise funds, they should finish the year with some retained earnings, because revenue, just like the Hillview, can't be predicted each year. It's dependent on weather more than anything else. Golf course is the same way.
Well,
We had a
just-
plan, though, and we're far off that plan, like I said we were gonna be.
But-
And now nobody even wants to consider going in the opposite direction, I find it's wrong to the taxpayer. It's wrong to the water users. We should at least have a serious discussion, which I agree with you, maybe we should wait. Let's make a decision to hold off till May. Why do we have to even do it at our next meeting, or in 3 meetings from now?
Mr. Chair?
Well, what we would do at the next meeting is we don't change the water rate and we move on.
I mean, keep it at a 0% increase.
Well, I think that's what
I'm
their
saying,
recommendation
what I'm
is.
saying, maybe we can have a discussion about actually bringing it down. Give some relief to these people. Give some relief to the water users.
Mr. Delaney.
Michael, I think I was in line with you last year. I thought the rate increase was excessive at that time. But my concern right now is what Mr. Fode has just expressed. These are just projections at this point. We're a half year into these new rates. I think what you're suggesting in terms of looking at a rate reduction will be more apt to more applicable probably a year from now, once we have a year and a half of history here in terms of these new rates and water usage and what we collect at that point. I think it's foolhardy if we were to consider a decrease at this point, unfortunately, although I didn't want to see the increase as high as it was a year ago. I don't think we have track history here to rely upon, and to avoid the roller coaster effect of decreasing and increasing it on a annual or a semi-annual basis is, I don't think that's in the best interest of the taxpayer either. But I would consider a year from now, if we're collecting 240,000 additional revenue and not 100,000 as we had thought this was going to generate, I would be more inclined to consider a decrease a year from now, but not presently.
Would you feel the same way in May if it's,
No, because I think,
turns into $340,000?
no, because I think at that point, you're only through 1 year, one cycle. I think you at least have to get through another one weather season with the new rates to see how we are at that point. But I think it's too soon to
And all due respect,
consider it.
Mr. Prisco, I mean, again, you know how hardly I fought against an increase of this magnitude last year. I think, once it was set, I think you have to move forward. Water is one of, as far as municipal, in finances, are one of the most undetermined thing you can do. I mean, it's just based on how much consumption is used, and it's based on the fact that whether you have a wet year or a dry year, how much is gonna be sold. So, I think my suggestion would be, and I'm not gonna speak for the commission, I'm gonna speak for myself at this point. My suggestion would be exactly what Mr. Delaney said. Hold off. I don't even know if May's the right time, might be next year at this time and decide. You can always decrease rates. I think the problem now is you don't want to the reason why we had to have such a large increase over the course of 12 months is because there was such a long period of time where rates weren't increased at a sustainable rate. The goal, I believe, is to get to where you need to be and then have a flat line rate over the course of 5 years. And you can't do that if you're gonna keep going up and down, up and down. I think you're making it more of a problem.
But it looks like we overshot, though.
Oh, I'm not one to say I told you so, but I told you so.
And we should be willing to make some kind of an adjustment to help out.
We don't, Mr. Chairman, we don't, based on the projections, first of all, there's a debt that we need to pay back, which we had agreed was gonna be $100,000 a year. So these new rates were going to stabilize, erase the deficit, pay back the money we borrowed from our other accounts, and then build up a surplus to help even things out. So do we overshoot? We don't know yet. We don't know yet, other than we have a projection for the current fiscal year if things stay the same, which we all know is subject to
Subject to
the weather
usage.
usage. So, to me, I'm glad to see that at least we're on track to pay back ourselves, at least in the first year, the $100,000 that we committed to doing, and starting to build up, as the chairman pointed out, some sort of a surplus and retained earnings to help stabilize the rates going forward. Again, every year we look at this. When we look at the stabilization, if we're going to look at a stabilization fund here, rate stabilization fund, that's when you do it, on an annual basis. But you also have to keep in mind the $100,000, $500,000 we need to pay ourselves back. So, it's far too early.
$100,000 was supposed to be. We're supposed to do both of those things, not just one.
No, but
But now you're saying, now we can even do it faster and we can
no,
actually
I'm not
hold
saying
even
faster.
more.
I didn't say let's
No,
take
he didn't say that.
$250,000. I'm saying let's stick to the $100,000 a year
What are you
over
gonna do
5
with
years.
$140,000? You just said put it in
$140,000.
retained earnings.
If that's what it's going to go into retained earnings, because
not what the plan
excuse me,
was.
but yes, it was. But last year at this time, what did we have in retained earnings? Nothing.
Minus.
We were minus.
Retained
We
earnings
were
were
in a
supposed to come
deficit.
from the $100,000.
No,
No,
not at
no,
all.
no, no.
Not at all.
No, absolutely not.
Not at all. We're supposed to pay back the $100,000 first and then build
I
up a
think-
retained earnings account.
Mike,
Right, from the $100,000.
No, the $100,000 goes into
No.
the other funds that we had that we
Right.
borrowed
And
from.
After it's
That's
done,
not the
after the 5 years
stabilization
is
fund.
done, then we were gonna continue to keep that rate hike there and take that $100,000 and.
And you haven't
apply
paid
it to
yourself
its
back.
rates.
You haven't made one
Mike, I
payment
think
yet.
you're missing a very important point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is by having some retained
$500,000.
earnings, right,
Yeah,
which should be some percentage of the total variation that we see in water usage.
yep, I understand that.
That covers it. So we start to put money into the capital fund that we took out, and we retain some earnings so that the following year, if we have a downfall, or if it's 2 years out, we have a downfall, we have a problem. Now, if we wait a while, right?
Yeah.
And we find out retained earnings gets to be too big, right? Then
Then you
it's
cut
time
your
to
rates.
make an adjustment.
We're not even
It's far
close.
too premature to do
You're 6
it.
months into
This is far more than what anybody expected.
Right, and the one thing I think you need to keep in mind, unlike taxes, people have control over their water bill based on the fact that they can not water as much as they want. And by that, I'm not saying that that's a reason not to lower their rates, but you need to take into account that if that happens, that money, that 240 is not gonna be there.
Because if we don't sell the water,
There's just
we
too
don't
many
get the money.
conditions, I'm sorry, Mr. O'Leary. There's just too many there's too many variables when it comes to water rates that, again, this is something that Mark, I think, worked up, and that's where he stood. If all things remain the same, that's where it'll be come June. But it doesn't, you know, again, in the 22 years that I've been doing this, it's the most variable condition in city finance that can be changed, only based on the fact, like I said, depending on weather, depending on people's usage,
Yeah.
depending on supply from our neighboring town.
And then we have some problem,
It's fine.
more people not paying the bill, too.
That's fine. You know,
I don't-
Steve, you laugh, but you know what? There are people out there hurting.
You
They
don't
could
see me
use this.
laugh.
You just laughed, and
I
I
laughed
just
at
think
what?
it's disrespectful. We should at least give some consideration to maybe approaching this again in May.
think if you
And wait
understand the
until May before
financing,
we make any
you
decision.
wouldn't- you become
I
the
do
same
understand it.
conclusion. No,
I
no,
think
you don't. You're
we
missing the
made a
whole point.
decision to go 24%, and this whole board, except for me, agreed that we should do it, and we did it. And now we have $140,000 projected. Let's wait till May before we do anything. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking you to make a decision or anything, but I don't want this to come up at the next meeting for a vote. Let's wait. There's no harm in waiting. Because guess what happens if it's $340,000? Are you still gonna feel the same way?
Come back and adjust the rates at any time. To me, let's establish the rates when we normally do on an annual basis, move it forward, and if, by chance, and by some good fortune, literally good fortune, you build up a huge surplus, by all means, you give it back to the ratepayers. But in the meantime, the ratepayers in the system still owe themselves some money here, $500,000 that needs to be paid back, first and foremost. And then you build up retained earnings at the same time, so that you can help keep the rates stable. What we've done is we've established a rate right now that's certainly gonna do that, depending upon the variables associated with the volatility of the use and how much is purchased from us. But right now, it's far too early to start monkeying with the rates.
That's why I said, let's address it in May.
So you just leave the rates the same, move forward, see where we end up, and then next year revisit it again. That's all.
I think if it's the pleasure of the board, then the Water Commission can come back in May and give you an update as to where we stand realistically as far as any surplus or what we feel we're gonna collect above and beyond what we need.
I
We'll be
think,
doing that anyway,
I
because in
think-
June, we're gonna be,
I think
Wait,
that
moving the money.
the way I would look at it is I would wait until year end, when all the accounting is done, we have an understanding of the bill pay cycle, we have a full look at what we've collected, and we look at all this money that was brought in, where did it come from? Did it come from this year's water, or did it come from some of it maybe back payments? You know, until we understand all of that, I don't think we can make a decision. I'd prefer to, make it, after the fiscal year ends, sometime after that.
and I
Again, it's some-
concur with your
sorry.
recommendation, with the commission's recommendation of no decrease, but no increase either, moving forward. And just,
Just leave it alone.
again, as
until-
Mr. Delaney pointed out, get some
And I think
historical
we do have a
perspective as-
policy that, in fact, this is late. We're supposed to have done this in November. Maybe we want to consider changing the date that we review water. Because I don't know, that was something the board set a long time ago.
Set so that any rate increase could be accommodated with the budget that's being developed. Dovetails with the budget process, obviously.
Yes, I understand. Further discussion? Can we move on?
Not on rates, but and this isn't for Mr. Fode, I think this is more for Mr. Clark and Mr. Cannavale, in terms of, I believe we received a correspondence from a resident probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago concerning the reading of his meter that was read, not on 91 days, but was read, I think, at the 109th day. And I know you responded, I'm not sure, Dick, was it, I think it was a letter from you, to him explaining why, but, and I know there was some weather-related events that led to that, but I personally, I don't think that, it's a calculation, 18 days past the 91th day is acceptable in terms of when someone's meter should be read, especially where that usage, if you're calculating usage on a 91-day cycle, obviously, if